Kwanzaa Day 4. Today, from the Nguzo Saba, is. Okay. Day 1 was Umoja. Day 2 was Kujichagulia. Day 3 was Ujamaa. And today is Ujamaa. Ujamaa, Cooperative Economics. It has the symbol is two interlocking half circles called the NCBD, symbol of togetherness and family. To build and maintain our own stores, shops, and other businesses, and to profit from them together. Shared work and wealth. The fourth principle is Ujamaa, cooperative economics, and is essentially a commitment to the practice of shared social wealth and the work necessary to achieve it. Ujamaa literally means familyhood and suggests a sharing of work and wealth in the manner of a family. It grows out of the fundamental communal concept that social wealth belongs to the masses of people who created it, and that no one should have such an unequal amount of wealth that it gives him/her the capacity to impose unequal wealth, exploitative or oppressive relations on others. I don't know why it says 43. I don't know. I don't really want to read this whole thing. It's really long. But basically, people have differences of opinions. I'm feeling way better today, by the way. I was not feeling great yesterday, but probably because it hadn't really worked out for like quite a few days then. So, I just, needed that little energy boost. Today I got that, so I'm feeling good. But yesterday I was kind of maybe more negative minded about the third topic, which was Ujamaa, collective work and responsibility. I feel like the Ujamaa, cooperative economics, really ties into that too. I do like the idea of nobody exploiting others, but I would say I'm not fully against the idea of somebody having way more wealth than others if they earned it. And I'm not even talking about like generationally, like even if some, say if there's I've watched, it wasn't Bar Rescue, I don't think, maybe it was a show like that where I think there was a family, it was like a black owned family barbecue restaurant or soul food restaurant or something like that, where I guess the father had handed down that business to the daughter who was managing it, and I guess that daughter wasn't a great manager. According to the staff, she was kind of lazy, didn't really do anything, kind of just didn't take charge, and then the quality of the food wasn't good, and it was like old, and they ran out of stuff a lot, and it was like just bad quality. And they helped that restaurant to kind of step it up, and I can kind of understand, like, okay, say if there's a situation like that where say no one ever helped them, and that same adult daughter, was in charge of this restaurant, managing it poorly, but it was a successful restaurant before when the father had it, and then when it went down to this next generation, it wasn't it was open, but the employees weren't happy. They didn't really have a lot of direction. maybe she was mean to them. I don't fully remember the details because I was binge watching. This was ages ago too. But I could see, okay, if that father had enough wealth to be able to sustain his multiple family members, open a business, hand it down to his daughter, I would say he earned that success. She didn't necessarily earn it until she got to the point where she was like doing a better job. And so I would say, just because she's there, if she's not like making any effort and she's like, well, I just get this thing and I can just hang out on in the office on YouTube in my office space and like let everybody just work until the day is over and then collect a paycheck. I mean, that's not earning. And she probably, all those employees and stuff were she didn't probably have to hire them or whatever. They were probably already there from day one when she got the business. So I would say if someone like that is like expecting to get money or maybe taking out government loans or whatever for business and it's just not going well, I would probably say she didn't earn it, and it's not necessarily she's not necessarily like wealthy, like she's in charge of the place, it's in her hands, but until she's doing a good job, that money isn't earned money. So even if she was having access to like the family business bank account, and compared to her other friends or peers, like her own age range, maybe the African American ones, like maybe their parents didn't have restaurants to give them, but maybe she's already set up because her family gave her that, so she does have that that privilege there. But if she's not doing anything with it, I wouldn't say it's earned. And so that's one thing I would pay attention to when it comes to cooperative economics. If somebody's putting in more work, and then there's others who just expect to like gain benefits from it, that is not a good way to do cooperative economics. And I think there would probably need to be a way to measure how people are doing, like based on their ability. But the issue is too, everybody has different abilities, and not every role or every job is seen as equal. Like for example, like I'm not saying that doctors are more important than janitors as human beings, no. But the work that a doctor does is important, and especially when it comes to saving lives or improving health. All the schooling that they went through was a lot of invested time and energy and effort and sweat, blood, and tears just to get their degrees and everything. For like 10 years or so of their life grinding trying to do that, versus if someone wants to become a janitor, they can just probably besides the fact that it would probably take some amount of experience and knowing how to repair certain stuff, and like you have to be handy, you have to know something. But if it's just sweeping and mopping and stuff like that, it's like that's not going to take you 10 years to learn how to do all that. And yes, it's important. I mean, we need sanitary environments. Doctors need a sanitary environment to practice. Patients would prefer a sanitary environment if they're getting treated. Wherever you work or wherever you study or wherever you live, you're going to want, you're not going to want roaches and spiders and ants and like sticky residue from people eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and dropping like food food sticky things and crumbs all over the place to where there's like critters, rodents, whatever. Um, you don't want that, you know. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants problems, you know. You're gonna want somebody, even if it's yourself, sweeping, swiffering, mopping, scrubbing, dusting, cleaning up the grime, and like spraying some type of cleaning solution, making the place look nice, tidying, you know. Nobody really wants to spend so much time in a space that's like just filthy. It's uncomfortable, it's unsettling on the mind, but it's important. Janitorial work, cleaning types of work, that's important work, but would people say that the janitor should be compensated as high as the doctor? I don't know. I'd say it's case by case, it depends on the person, but I do understand why certain people in society get paid more money. I'm not saying it's like a fair system all the time. Like there is a lot of, oppression and systemic types of issues that go into even like the ability to get the education or the ability to get a job or the ability to get the opportunities. If you're like in some of the movies where someone lives in an impoverished neighborhood and they're trying to study, but they have to worry about gangs and bad people and carrying their school books in a, what was it? Was that Fresh Prince where how he was saying like carried his school books in a pizza box so he wouldn't get beaten up? Just to try to get home and study, and then you come home and study. Like I used to tutor kids, and I never fully asked, but I'm pretty sure there was a studio where I used to tutor this one kid where they almost never turned the lights on. And I remember using my cell phone because I was helping him read, and I would use my cell phone to turn on the cell phone, to turn on the light to help him read. And we were sitting in this studio, and they would always give me coffee. They were very sweet. And then I just sit there and help him read, and we would be like in the dark otherwise. And I'm pretty sure they did that to try to save extra money. I wasn't gonna ask. I can't remember if I gave him like a tap light or something like that, so that he could like use it. But yeah, I remember it was pretty dark, and then trying to read, and then some people that's their situation, or like in certain countries, people have to sit outside certain places to use the internet, or they sit outside street lamps to like study late at night because they don't have electricity for lights and they don't have internet at home. And it's like, if you're coming from that, I'm not saying you can't make it, but those types of students are having to go through a lot more of a struggle in a lot of areas compared to somebody who might not have to deal with anything even remotely difficult, like a household like how my family's set up. I didn't have to get a job and work while I was in school. There was a point in college where I did because I wanted to, but maybe I needed to just to take off some of the burden, but my folks kind of set it up so that they could pay, and they wanted for us to just use studying as our full-time job. And then the sacrifices along the way that all of us were making, like, because I wasn't working a lot of the time in high school, college, but I also am not a super fast learner, and I don't do well in school if I don't have enough time and energy, and like there's no way I could have worked and done even remotely as well as I did. Um, and I didn't even hardly do that well, and I was studying like all the time. Like I used to study late, I used to study before class, I used to study after class, I used to study weekends. I would take maybe Sabbath off, and that would be basically it, and then just back to studying all the time. And it worked because I got the work done, but yeah, it wasn't. My lifestyle was kind of set up so that I could study, and so I was able to study, and that's what I did, and just the whole time studied, and I don't know. That was kind of what I did, but yeah, like not everybody has things set up that way, or even a household where it's like that's what you're expected to do. Like we weren't expected to like be doing a whole lot of other stuff other than getting good grades, and doing well in school. And if there's extracurriculars, doing well in those. I volunteered with church stuff a lot. I definitely spend a lot of free time doing praise team practicing, or volunteering to be in the plays, or doing like cleanups for people, or helping set up and tear down certain stuff, and I had band practice with my friends. Like I had other stuff I was doing, other skill building and stuff like that, but a lot of it I wasn't getting paid until a certain point. But yeah, and then even the days where I had to like pick somebody up to take them to work with me or school with me or something, just that extra little time and energy it would take, I would be late a little bit sometimes, because if they would run like 3-4 minutes late, like if they weren't ready right away, and then I'd get somewhere later, and it was like, yeah, I just need them to be kind of like ready. And a lot of times they weren't ready, and then we'd end up being late all the time. Because for me, it was like I would usually get somewhere at enough time for them to just get out of the house right away, and then a lot of the times they would have to do like one extra thing, like take the dog out, or like lock up a bunch of stuff. Like usually for me, I was like, I'm in your driveway, and I would expect you're already just sitting by the door, just waiting to like grab your bag, walk out the door, and lock the door, and come outside. If you're not already outside, I wasn't expecting someone to wash 2 cups in the sink and then take your dog out and then turn off all the house lights and lock all the doors, and like it's like, no, I didn't come here with enough time for you to do all that. Like I'm just thinking I'm not even going to be here 60 seconds. So then it's like having to gauge another person's ability to be kind of like timely and counting those extra couple minutes. A lot of times they weren't ready. Like they were ready, but they weren't like ready, and for oftentimes I miscalculated that. And so yeah. And I ended up coming in a little late sometimes, because like I had to consider the parking and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was my fault. I could have left earlier, but I was like depressed and having trouble getting out the door in the first place. So I don't know, it was a challenge, but yeah, there are a lot of things I learned along the way, but it's like, I don't know I don't know how I feel about cooperative economics because it really depends on everybody's work ethic. Um, I've worked with people before where it was like two of us doing the same job, and it's like one of us is like cleaning and scrubbing and grinding at the job, and then the other person's just like sitting there on their phone or not really like doing it like in too much detail. And it's like I'm doing all the work, like I could see all the effort I put in, and like I cleared out this whole space, and then the other person barely did like one section where they organized like 3 books or something, and it's like, dude, we're supposed to be cleaning out this person's garage, and like I'm doing all the work, you know. And at the end of the day, we got paid the same amount of money, you know. And so with that kind of thing, you know, is that fair? I mean, I'm pretty sure they were working kind of to their ability because they had stuff going on. I know that they did. Looking back at the situation, they had things going on, but was it fair? You know? Like, that's where I'd kind of say, I don't know. Like, how can you tell if something's fair? Like, with cooperative economics, like, I know people oftentimes maybe think it's not fair for people to have enough money more than everybody else, but a lot of times too, those are the people who are hiring people and creating businesses, and they have to make a profit out of it too. So I don't really know. Like I'm pretty torn about that kind of topic, because I do have a pretty strong work ethic, and I do work hard, and you know, I've been around some people who don't maybe organize or focus very well, and they're not really able to kind of like hit the mark as often. But then there's other people who are definitely, you know, they have it together way more than I do, and so there's kind of like a spectrum with that kind of thing. So I don't really know. Like I kind of see the purpose of it. I'd say what the key for me is the exploitation piece. The key for me would be, you know, I also would agree that you don't want anybody exploiting others. Like just because they can afford to hire a bunch of people, they need to pay them well, treat them well. I've known people who hire handy workers or people to do like landscaping and stuff like that, and then they haven't paid them well, and those people were like telling me like, hey, you know, can you pay me, or can you tell this person to pay me because you know them and they haven't been paying. And then there's like a whole story line where, you know, the person who was supposed to be paying is like, well, they didn't do a good job. And then I was kind of thinking in my head, like, well, did you pay them or did you pay them on time? Like, you can't just, like, not pay people on time. You know what I mean? It's like, just because you're having a financial issue and somebody's doing all your yard work, you can't just not pay them. They're depending on that money. And so if you can't pay them, they shouldn't be working. But, you know, that is an issue of its own. It's like, because I've been there before where I'm like, you know, I would like know exactly how much money I needed, and I'd be down to like the last, like, okay, I can afford a burger for dinner, and then I've got no more money in my bank, and because I'm getting paid in the morning, and when I wake up in the morning, I'll be able to go get food or whatever. And I would, you know, I would say part of the paycheck was probably squandered. It wasn't like I wasn't like running around like partying and stuff. Like I was doing other stuff. I wasn't just only spending on necessities at those times. But I mean, it wasn't out of control spending. I just wasn't, making a lot. And so, um, you know, going out a couple times and spending like maybe an extra $100, or having like an extra spending like an extra $100 extra a month out of my paycheck, or spending like, yeah, even an extra 100 would have been like maybe I would have had an extra 100, but I was like spending it. So like there were times where I wasn't making a lot of money, but I've always made enough to at least afford my bills. I would say I've had a past where I maybe wasn't always making enough to afford I wasn't making enough to afford to do all the stuff I was trying to do. And then I kind of would mess with my money a little bit and, you know, not do too well. But, you know, it wasn't a long period of time. I got sick of that quick. Like, I was like, this is stressful. I don't like this. So it didn't last that long. There was like a year period of time where that happened like a few times. But I was like, I can't keep doing this. Like, this is too much. It's too stressful. But, you know, I kind of learned my lesson out of that, you know, but some people, you know, they don't even make enough to afford the basics, you know. And so if somebody's paying them, and if they had my situation where it's like, I'm down to my last few dollars for my last meal, and then I come and we're gonna eat, and then, you know, there's no more money for any other thing, and then I'm getting paid late. I'm not getting paid the next day like I thought, like I was expected to, like I was promised, like it was scheduled, and now I gotta wait 3-4 days or an indefinite amount of time, and I have like no money for that amount of days. You know, that's not fair. That's not fair if somebody does that to their workers. You know, and I've known people who do that to their workers, and it's not okay. Just because the employer has a problem with their, you know, budgeting, you know, the employee shouldn't have to suffer because they're the ones doing the work too. So you always want to have an organized boss. Not all bosses, not all managers are organized enough. Some of them lie, they gaslight. Some of them just don't budget correctly. Some of them, yeah, they have their own issues sometimes. So some of them are abusive. Some of them are just never even around. And it depends on the type of site. Sometimes that's fine. Sometimes that's not. So it really is situation to situation, in my opinion. But I could see how people would think otherwise, how people would say otherwise or feel otherwise. Like if you're not making a lot of money and you don't have a lot to your name, and you're like looking around and you're seeing that there are other people who could potentially help you out and they're not doing it, that's not necessarily the greatest thing either. But no, it's I don't know, it's not you know, I don't know, in theory it sounds nice, but I would say in actual practice I've seen it to where it is hard to be in community with people. You know, it takes a certain amount, and I've mostly felt it or noticed it through like church settings, but even work settings or like casual other settings. Like I was in a band before. Everybody has their own creative things. Some people can't show up on time for practice. Some people don't have a car. You need to give them a ride. You know, some people are more independent than others. Some people some people just um yeah. Uh yeah, some people just, maybe don't have a whole lot um you know there might not be like a whole lot um to really, get what you need or what they need. Um, but it might be hard to find people to help, and then other people might not want to help, or they might want to help, or they might just be bad managers. You don't want like bad management, but I don't know. It's a tricky situation. Like, if everyone who could help did help, I don't think there would be as many issues in the world. But there are different things, though. Certain people can't focus well. Certain people are always late. Certain people don't budget well. People have their strengths and weaknesses. And when you come into a community and there's people relying on one another, those strengths and weaknesses are going to come up. So you'd have to probably determine, a good combination of people to be within the same community together. Because if they're not a good combo, someone's gonna have more problems. Somebody has an anger issue. Somebody is hard to talk to and impossible to be around, and they're terrible. They're like a terrible person. You know. I don't know, but it's tricky. But there are pluses and minuses, positives, negatives, and neutrals about that type of a setup. Like I would say too, you never want to get to a point where you're too frustrated with people, because it's going to show in the way you treat them. You never want to be at a point where you're bitter when you're trying to assist or help or volunteer or give charity, do charity work. You want to be in a good spirit when you're doing it, because if you can't be in a good spirit, it's not really gonna always help. I mean, yeah, it's better to do it with a poor spirit than with not at all. But yeah, you don't want to be all grumpy and grouchy and rude and mean. Just because somebody is mooching, and if you're someone who needs a lot, it's good to get awareness. This is the last thing I'll say on this topic, though. There was this, I was listening to something the other day. Maybe it was on Christmas. I was listening to a podcast, and this couple was saying, this couple was mentioning that they don't. What were they saying? They were saying that they don't, or this person was saying that when they're asking favors of others, they try not to ask more than two things at a time before they do at least one or two things for the other person. They try not to ask two favors. It's like, oh, can we schedule a collab together? Because I'm trying to get my numbers up. And then hey, by the way, I need a ride to the airport. Another day, it's like they try not to ask too much without giving back. And I've noticed, like I've talked about before, I've gotten myself into situations where I'm the one that's giving. And I wouldn't say that the other people aren't giving, but it's like it's a lot, you know. Um, Sometimes it's a lot where people are just like expecting. So, and I would say, you know, when I go out of town, I get a little bit of that. Like, I get a little bit of like friends who are like, I'll come pick you up or I'll drop you off, and it's very sweet. It's very nice, you know, because they know I come into town, I'm already spending a lot of money, and then it's like, and I gotta pay for Ubers, you know, and I gotta like, you know, so they're kind of like, or they'll pick up dinner or something like that. Like they make it fun and nice, you know. But I don't know, dude. Like it's a little tricky to try to figure out. I'm not saying it's bad. Like I'm not like anti-giving. I've been on both sides where I've been someone who needed, and so I'm taking, and then I've been on the other side where I'm the one giving, and I'm like giving, and it's like it's nice, but I'd say I guess the hard thing for me is when it's like when I'm giving and I can't really extend too much, and then I kind of like make a little effort to overextend a little bit. That's the part where I think maybe I've gone wrong, where it's like, well, I can't do this anymore, and I'm still trying to do it, you know, versus being like, look, I gotta stop picking you up an hour and a half away one way because I can't afford the gas, you know. And I don't know, but you know, people are cool. You know, overall, people are cool. I wouldn't say that they are like too ungrateful or anything like that. I would just say, yeah, I wouldn't say people are too like ungrateful or anything. It's just, yeah, it can be hard. You know, community related stuff is kind of one of my favorite topics, but it's also one of the hardest things to actually practice. Because sometimes you're going to be mad at each other. You know, sometimes you're not going to want to help other people. Sometimes you're going to be moody and have your own stuff going on and just want to stay home. Sometimes you're not going to want to spend any of your money, even if it's $5. You know, even if you have thousands and thousands of dollars, you might not want to spend an extra $5 donating to something that you're kind of just like, why does this person always need somebody helping them? You know, and those mindsets are valid. I'm not saying that anybody is like wrong for thinking that way, but I mean, if everybody thinks that way, you know, a lot of things in society won't get done, or won't improve, or people won't get helped. But I guess, you know, it's up to the individual. That's it for now. Thanks for listening.